This warship looks like a military machine. But before it ever reaches the sea, it depends on a chain most people never see. A rare earth magnet refined thousands of miles away. A chip made on machines only a handful of companies can build. A port that can be blocked. A payment system that can be cut off. A shipping lane narrow enough to turn global trade into a bargaining chip. For 30 years, globalization was sold as efficiency. But in the New World Order, efficiency has become leverage. The countries with power are not only the countries with the biggest armies, they are the countries that can interrupt the systems those armies depend on. This is the hidden map of the multipolar world. And it runs through chokepoints. The old map of power was easy to draw. It showed alliances, borders, bases, carriers, missiles, and flags. That map still matters, but is no longer enough. The new map runs underneath it. It shows where minerals are mined, where they are refined, where chips are made, where ports move cargo, where insurance is priced, where payment systems settle trade, and where ships have no choice but to pass through narrow water. This is why the phrase multipolar world can be misleading. It makes the future sound like a clean chessboard with several great powers sitting at equal corners. The real picture is messier. The world is not simply splitting into permanent blocks. It is becoming harder to organize, harder to predict, and easier to interrupt. A country can buy from one side, borrow from another, train with a third, and still refuse to become anyone's junior partner. That is the new logic. Not isolation. Selective connection. And the central question is no longer only who has the largest fleet, the largest economy, or the largest arsenal. The question is who can keep functioning when the systems around them are interrupted. To see it clearly, start with critical minerals. The old resource story was simple. Oil made the 20th century move. Whoever controlled energy had leverage. But the 21st century is adding a different layer. Lithium, nickel, cobalt, graphite, copper, rare earths, and the specialized materials that make batteries, sensors, magnets, guidance systems, aircraft, satellites, drones, radars, and electric grids work. This is not only a green energy story, it is a defense story. A modern military is not made only of steel, fuel, and soldiers. It is made of electronics, precision components, permanent magnets, batteries, thermal systems, sensors, and supply chains that stretch across continents. The mine is the part people can see. The mine has trucks, roads, dust, and ore. But the mine is not always the real choke point. The refinery is. The separation plant is. The chemical step that turns raw material into something a factory can actually use is where leverage often appears. The International Energy Agency warned in its 2025 Critical Minerals Outlook that refining and processing have become more concentrated, not less. For key energy minerals, the average market share of the top 3 refining nations rose from about 82% in 2020 to 22% in 2020 to about 86% in 2024. That is not diversification. That is concentration. And the concentration is not evenly spread. For a broader group of strategic energy-related minerals, the same IEA analysis found that China was the dominant refiner for 19 out of 20 minerals, with an average market share around 70%. That does not mean one country controls every mine. It means the middle of the chain can matter more than the beginning. You can own the ore and still need someone else's processing capacity. You can announce a new mine and still wait years for the refining, permits, financing, expertise, waste handling, transport links, and customer contracts that make the mine useful. That is why critical minerals have become national security supply chains. The United States Department of Defense has described securing critical minerals as vital to national security. That is not rhetorical decoration. These materials appear in systems that modern forces rely on. Aircraft, submarines, missiles, radars, unmanned platforms, satellites, precision munitions, and the electronics inside command networks. If the supply chain breaks, the problem does not begin on the battlefield. It begins in procurement. It begins in the shipyard. It begins in the factory waiting for a part that has become political. Now add another layer, Producer countries know this. Indonesia's nickel policy became one of the clearest examples. Instead of remaining only a supplier of raw ore, Indonesia restricted raw nickel exports and pushed more processing inside the country. The policy created disputes, investment, new refineries, environmental questions, and a new lesson for resource-rich states. If the world needs your material badly enough, you can try to force more of the value chain onto your own soil. That is resource nationalism. It is not always clean. It can raise costs, create trade fights, and concentrate new environmental burdens. But it changes the bargaining position. The same logic appears when export controls enter the story. China has used controls on selected minerals and related technologies, including rare earth and magnet-related items. The IEA noted that export restrictions on critical minerals have expanded in number and scope, especially since 2023. Some restrictions now cover not just raw and refined materials, but processing technologies. That is the key word, technologies. The struggle is not only over the rock in the ground. It is over the knowledge and industrial capacity to turn that rock into power. This is the first hidden choke point. The mine gets the headline. The processor gets the leverage. The second choke point is smaller, cleaner, and even harder to replace. The semiconductor. A chip can look ordinary. A small square of material, sealed inside a device, almost invisible to the person using it. But advanced chips now sit inside artificial intelligence systems, radars, satellites, secure communications, logistics networks, autonomous vehicles, missile defense systems, electronic warfare tools, cloud infrastructure, and the civilian economy that pays for all of it. That is why the semiconductor conflict is not only a trade dispute, it is an industrial control contest. The United States has tightened export controls on advanced computing semiconductors, semiconductor manufacturing equipment, and supercomputing-related items aimed at countries of concern, including China. The Bureau of Industry and Security said the rules were designed to restrict the ability to purchase and manufacture certain high-end chips critical for military advantage. The important part is not just the ban. The important part is not just the GAN. The important part is the cat and mouse game. Each rule creates an incentive to route around the rule. Each workaround creates a new enforcement problem. Then the rule changes again. This is why the chip war keeps expanding, from chips to machines to software to foreign-produced items to subsidiaries to foundries to servicing to the knowledge held by engineers. The chip is not the real choke point either. The choke point is the ecosystem that makes the chip possible. Advanced lithography tools, ultra-clean facilities, specialized gases, high-end packaging, design software, foundry access, export licenses, maintenance contracts, engineers who know how to keep the machines alive. Industry analysis from the Semiconductor Industry Association and Boston Consulting Group warned that the semiconductor supply chain has more than 50 points where a single region holds more than 65% of global market share. That means the system is not fragile in one place. It has many narrow points, and each narrow point can become geopolitical. This is where the old language of globalization starts to break. For decades, companies were told to optimize, put each stage of production where it was most efficient, build long supply chains, cut inventory, trust that trade would keep moving. That system created enormous wealth. It also created dependencies so complex that few citizens ever saw them. Then states discovered that the same networks that made the world efficient could also be used for pressure. Scholars call this weaponized interdependence. The idea is simple. When important networks have central hubs, the actor closest to the hub can gain power over everyone who depends on it. A payment network can become leverage. A chip tool can become leverage. A chip tool can become leverage. A port can become leverage. A shipping lane can become leverage. A refinery can become leverage. The most powerful weapon in the story may be interruption. That does not mean the world is deglobalizing into separate islands. It means countries are trying to become harder to interrupt. That is very different. The United States talks about friendshoring, reshoring, industrial policy, export controls. and supply chain resilience. China talks about self-reliance, domestic innovation, dual circulation, and control over strategic inputs. Europe talks about economic security, strategic autonomy, and reducing risky dependencies. Resource-rich states talk about downstream processing. Middle powers talk about options. And that brings us to BRICS. BRICS is often described in dramatic terms, as if it were a new military alliance or a direct replacement for the Western order. That is the wrong frame. BRICS is not a new NATO. It is not a single army. It is not one ideology. It contains countries with different systems, different rivalries, different interests, and sometimes different views of one another. Its importance is that it gives states another table. Brazilian BRICS presidency material in 2025 described an expanded group including the original members, Brazil, Russia, India, China, and South Africa, plus newer members such as Egypt, Ethiopia, Indonesia, Iran, Saudi Arabia, and the United Arab Emirates. It also described partner country arrangements for other states. The exact membership list matters, and it should always be checked before publication because this space changes quickly. But the larger point is clear. Many countries do not want to be forced into a single permanent camp. They want access to Western markets, Chinese investment, Gulf capital, Russian energy, Indian technology, local currency trade, and their own room to maneuver. That is multi-alignment. It is not the same as neutrality. It is bargaining. India can work with the United States and its partners in one arena, while remaining active in BRICS in another. Brazil can criticize parts of the Western-led order while still trading deeply with the West. Saudi Arabia can work with Washington on security, sell energy to Asia, build ties with China, and explore new diplomatic rooms. Indonesia can join new groupings while still trying to protect its own role as a maritime and economic power in Southeast Asia. The middle powers are not just choosing sides, they are pricing sides. This is why local currency payment discussions matter, even when they are exaggerated. The dollar is not dead. That is not the point. The real question is exposure. If a country believes its trade, reserves, banks, or companies can be disrupted through dollar-based systems, it will look for partial alternatives. Not necessarily to replace the dollar tomorrow, but to reduce the number of switches someone else can turn off. BRICS declarations have discussed local currencies and cross-border payment cooperation. That is not the same as creating a finished replacement for SWIFT or the US dollar, but it is part of the same pattern. Countries are not only asking, "Who is our ally?" They are asking, "Where are we vulnerable?" That question appears in minerals. It appears in chips. It appears in payments. It appears in ports. And it appears at sea. This is why this story belongs in the naval briefing room. Sea power is not only about battles between fleets. Sea power is also about keeping the systems alive before the battle ever starts. Most of the world's traded goods still move by sea. Energy moves by sea. Grain moves by sea. Grain moves by sea. Vehicles move by sea. Ore moves by sea. Containers move by sea. Military logistics moves by sea. Undersea cables carry the data that makes global finance and command networks function. The sea lane is not background. It is the system. Look at the map. The Strait of Hormuz shapes energy risk. The Bab el-Mandeb connects the Red Sea to the Indian Ocean. The Suez Route links Europe and Asia. The Suez of Malacca carries a huge share of Asia's maritime trade. The Taiwan Strait sits near the center of the semiconductor world's most dangerous geography. These are not just blue spaces between countries. They are narrow points in the operating system of the global economy. When a route becomes unsafe, ships divert. When ships divert, time increases. When time increases, costs rise. When costs rise, factories, consumers, militaries, and governments feel it. A navy cannot refine cobalt. A navy cannot manufacture the most advanced lithography machine. A navy cannot turn a payment system on or off by itself. But navies protect the movement that connects those systems. They reassure allies. They escort shipping. They show presence at chokepoints. They support sanctions enforcement. They protect undersea infrastructure. They move fuel, ammunition, aircraft parts, sailors, marines, humanitarian aid, and repair capacity across distances that land power cannot easily cross. In the old unipolar moment, many people assumed that this movement was almost automatic. Trade moved, payments cleared, ships arrived, factories received parts. The system worked in the background. The new multipolar world is making the background visible. Now a mineral restriction can become a defense issue. A chip rule can become an AI race. A payment discussion can become a sovereignty project. A port can become a strategic asset. A sea lane can become a pressure point. And the middle power can gain leverage by refusing to lock itself permanently into one side's map. This is not a story about the end of globalization. It is a story about globalization becoming harder, more guarded, and more political. The old promise was that interdependence would make conflict irrational. The new reality is that interdependence can also make coercion precise. If you know where the other side depends on you, you know where to apply pressure. If you know where you depend on the other side, you know where you must build resilience. That is the hidden contest underneath the New World Order, not one dramatic line on a map. Many small switches, many ports, many refineries, many licenses, many cables, many cables, many truths, many countries trying to make sure no single rival can turn the lights off. So when people talk about a multipolar world, do not only imagine summits, flags, and speeches. Imagine the path of a mineral from a mine to a refinery. Imagine the path of a chip from a design file to a machine, a fab, a server, a radar, or a drone. Imagine the path of a payment through a financial network. Imagine the path of a container ship through a narrow strait. Then imagine what happens when any one of those paths is interrupted. That is where power is moving. The New World Order is not only a diplomatic map. It is a supply chain map. It is a refinery map. It is a chip map. It is a payment map. And above all, for anyone who studies sea power, it is still a naval map. Because the hidden choke points controlling the New World Order do not float above the ocean, they cross it.